If you're dealing with a high conflict situation, we understand how challenging and overwhelming it can be. That's why we've created a free resource for you to help you begin managing the high conflict dynamic. Our high conflict diversion program booklet, When Co-Parenting Doesn't Work, provides great information and innovative strategies to help you disengage from the conflict and prioritize your child's best interests. To access this valuable resource, simply visit highconflict.net/booklet and download your free copy of When Co-Parenting Doesn't Work. We believe that every parent deserves the support and guidance they need to navigate high conflict divorce and custody battles. And we're here to help you every step of the way. So be sure to visit highconflict.net/booklet to receive your booklet today. And thank you for tuning in to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast. We look forward to supporting you on your journey. Welcome back, everybody, to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brook Olson. This week, my special guest is Derrick Chevalier. And this is episode number 300. We hit a pretty big milestone here on this one. Disastrous divorce to priceless relationship with your kids. So it's interesting, Derrick, because you came to me through an invitation that you had put out with regards to your programs and your books on negotiation.
Right.
And very quickly, we discovered this commonality in dealing with high conflict divorces, mediation, and what have you. And we had a delightful conversation in getting us to this. So I want to kind of enter into that and tell me a little bit about your DDPR program. The disastrous divorce to priceless relationship with your kids, because this topic, this notion that we're in, that I believe our way through conflict is through our parenting. That is the place that really needs the focus and the stability. So tell me a little bit about your program.
Sure. Well, the program was born out of the fact that I've gone through 2 divorces. I had a divorce where I had a stepdaughter that I raised from about 7, 8 years old until she was almost 19. And then 7 years later, I was married again. That marriage lasted almost 15 years. But the divorce took place over about 6 years, just because, talk about high conflict, it was as high conflict as you could have. So out of that, I realized once my children had gotten a little older, I had a conversation with my daughter, and I talked about her experience. My son had a very, very difficult time. He's older by almost 2 years. And I knew that he had a very difficult time at one point, saying, I died the day that you told us that you and Mom were getting a divorce. That was pretty stirring. My daughter, who did not exhibit the same physical and emotional trauma outwardly as a result of the divorce, actually suffered even more so than than my son. And in a conversation with her, and a number of conversations, I realized that my perception of what my children had gone through was not at all their perception of what they had gone through. And that immediately brought my attention to the fact that I'm probably not the only parent like that. When we're going through divorce, we are focused so much on that relationship between the ex-spouse or spouse that we think we're providing support for our children, but our attention and time and energy and emotional stability is all tied up into the divorce and all of those elements of the divorce, support and care and visitation and all of those things.
It's amazing how that just takes over, isn't it? It just that driving of this myopic look at the world, and we think, like you were talking, that these kids are the focus, and we're losing so much energy and bleeding so much energy into divorce that that's really not an accurate depiction of what's going on, is it?
Not at all. And the more children of divorce that I've talked to, the more that's been reinforced. The idea that for some kids, I find that the older kids, my son was 2 years older, and when I've talked to other children who are a little older, they don't always exhibit behaviors that tell us that they are suffering. And that's because in the moment of that divorce, they step up and take over the role. At one point, my daughter told me, she goes, well, I stayed and I took care of my dad, right? So that wasn't my perception that she was taking care of me. But indeed she was, because I was so focused on the impact of the divorce. So
it's really a crack up, because what you're talking about, I was just sitting here running some reels, getting ready for my team, and the subject was one of enmeshment, but also getting into that place where the child has this perception that they have to take care of the parent, that that parentification happens, and we're just going, holy, I didn't need that. And they had this perception that they needed to be here to take care of me. And that was part of the problem in the relationship with the other parent.
yes.
It's
Yes.
crazy how unconscious that piece is from a parent's standpoint, not realizing that that's happening.
Exactly. And you just bring up one of the points of what we call snuff negotiation. One of the tenets of snuff negotiation is that perception trumps reality. And that understanding was born out of that experiences, but also many other in my negotiation, consulting, and training practice, where in the past, we have said that perception is reality. But in the 21st century, perception trumps reality, that we see that whether or not something's true or not has little bearing on people's behavior or their physiology or their thought process, and therefore on their behavior, because what that perception are the actions that are connected to the assumption, right? So we believe in snuff that an assumption is a belief, and that's borne out by the dictionary.
Right.
Now, if you also look at the dictionary, it will tell you, many of them will tell you that a presumption is a synonym of assumption. And generally, the second definition of presumption is something that appears to be true in the absence of proof to the contrary. And that's the legal definition that's used. So we focus on that second definition to say that even beyond that perception, the difference between an assumption and a presumption is action. Mm-hmm. So if I don't argue with someone's belief, because we all have beliefs, but if I believe that a stock is going to go up, that's a belief. But if I believe that a stock is going to go up and I then purchase the stock or shares of the stock, I now presume that it is going to go up, so that my assumption has led to an action that is consistent with my belief. I buy the shares. Now, my buying the shares and believing they're going to go up does not have any bearing whatsoever on whether or not they actually do go up. And I know that very well.
So there's got to be a lot of infill in this process. And I think that there's two things that are really important that you're saying here in that infill. Number one, the children aren't capable of that infill. They don't have enough data and experience to do the infill. And the parent may or may not have the ability to do that infill. So from my perspective in this, I'm hoping to be dealing with that parent that does.
Right.
So they are the parent that is going to guide the solutions that go forward. And they're going to be able to do their own infill of that data so they can see from the other parent's perspective what is happening there, and they can approach the negotiation, if you will, from one of de-escalation, problem solving, and boundary. Is that
Right.
in the right realm here?
Absolutely. And you bring up, again, that marriage between negotiation and specifically what we call snuff negotiation and the relationship between spouses and children. One of those things is that what the negotiation part is for us is sometimes making or helping the parent understand that definition of assumption and presumption. And because not only many parents, but many, and I would venture to say most professionals don't understand. We asked several thousand people, what is the definition of assumption? Most people can't give you a succinct definition, and they certainly don't know or recognize that a presumption is when they take that belief and couple it with an action. So part of what the negotiation skills that we are bringing into is to help educate parents about their belief, and then disconnecting the fact that just because you believe something and you and then you take an action on it doesn't necessarily prove or denote that your belief and your action are going to produce the result that you assumed was going to take place. And that creates an environment in which they're able to say, I didn't realize that. And that's one of the points at which you can talk about that de-escalation, because there are other elements that we can talk about that lay the groundwork so that a parent is open to be, if you will, re-educated about their beliefs and their behaviors and the impact on the children and on the other spouse.
Yeah, and this is so important, Derrick, and thank you for just kind of digging into this, because this is the premise that I function from, and that parents are so unaware of what is driving this. And by renting space in the other parent's head, by having that assumption that they're doing something for a particular reason, and not really spreading it out and looking at what's in between everything, this notion of static and noise, and really getting into what is the signal that is really happening here that we can solve the problems with. And it requires. Hi there. We hope you're loving this episode and finding it super helpful. We wanted to let you know that the rest of this episode is exclusively available to members of the Disengagement Zone. But don't worry, you can join right now and get your first month completely free. That means you'll have access to all of our exclusive episodes, tools, and resources at no cost for the entire month. Just click on the link in the description to sign up today. Take this opportunity to dive deeper and get the support you need. We'd love to welcome you to the Disengagement Zone.